Okay, so this is a basic, this is going to be a basic tutorial that starts right from the beginning in terms of how do you approach the keyboard, how do you approach the piano, right from how do you put your hands on the keys and how do you push down the keys and how do you generate sound out of this instrument, how do you sit, all that stuff. And I I'm a fairly recent, I would say, student of technique on the piano. But in the past, I studied jazz drums at a college level. And I'll never forget my first drum lesson with my teacher because he essentially told me, "You don't know how to hold the sticks." And I think I've been playing piano for a long time. I've never been taught proper technique. And I've always been too impatient with that process as a pianist to spend much time on it. And consequently, I think I've really delayed progression. So, what I have been getting into recently is understanding the mechanics of playing the piano. And just as an example, when I was learning how to hold the sticks, and remember, I'm a college student studying jazz. I've played drums for over at that point probably over 10 years and or right around 10 years, and I'd taken lessons and I'd played in jazz band in high school, and I thought I knew what I was doing, and my teacher stripped everything back and went right to the snare drum and the practice pad because fundamentally one of the things I was doing wrong was I was holding the stick more like this. And so he was a proponent of something called the Moeller technique, which Jim Chapin was an advocate for. And the way he described it to me was, okay, you're holding your sticks like this. Now look at the range of motion that you can get when your wrist is doing that as compared to when you turn your hand over, a much greater range of motion. Then it's this, you know, ball and socket, a hinge and another hinge, and then your fingers that all come together, if you can imagine a drumstick in my hand, to tap, to create the sound. And I spent so many hours doing this that it just feels very natural to me. I'm starting to approach, and as you can tell, very loose. So you never want tension when you're playing music, and that's what the practice time is for, is to become very comfortable playing with no tension. And one of the keys to this is to play slowly. So I would sit there on the snare drum and just in front of a mirror watch myself hitting the drum left, right, like that, over and over again, trying to get a consistent tone, trying to get a consistent volume, trying to get consistency between the hands, hitting it in the same spot, all of these things. And man, did it do wonders for my ability to play. When I actually got out there and just played, I wasn't thinking about all the technique I'd been working on or trying to incorporate it. I was just more naturally accessing creative ideas. So when we come to the piano, I'm a student of this myself. I'm on a journey of learning, so I don't pretend to be an expert. But what I have learned about this has been very helpful. So the first thing is to sit kind of with your, I guess they're called sit bones, near the edge of the bench or the seat in my case. This is probably not the most ideal situation because this isn't a proper bench and it's got a little bit of give to it, but nonetheless, I'm sitting at the edge of it with my feet planted firmly, and I'm bringing my hands up so that we're sort of at a 90-degree angle. But the attitude, if you will, of your arms, shoulders, hands should be all relaxation. And then I'm putting my fingers on this note and this note. They're G's. And this is middle C. So if you've never even played a piano, it's important to know there's a pattern. You can tell. We'll get into this in a little bit. But if I play this note here, and then you can look and see that there's two black notes, and then there's kind of a gap, and then there's three white notes, and then this whole thing kind of repeats, if you can notice this. So this is C, Now we go outwards from there, and each of the notes have names based on letters of the alphabet. So C, D, E, F, G, and then it goes down from C. It actually goes to A, B, C, and then it comes back to C. So C, B, A, G. So these are the same notes, they're just an octave apart. And you can tell they look the same, they have the same shape. So that's a clue, if you've never played the piano before, to know where to put your hands. So let's start with simple, fingers curved, shoulders relaxed, elbows at your side. You don't want to do this. Why? Because you're now introducing tension. So keep your elbows at your side. And then just push down with your thumb and just feel that kind of the weight is not necessarily coming from the muscle, these tiny musculature here that's pushing down. You kind of want to have the whole weight of your arm, your shoulder, these long muscles activating, and you just want to go back and forth from your thumb all the way to your pinky and back, just like this, nice and slow. Feeling as relaxed as you can while you're doing it. And then we do some things to just try to release any residual tension that we might have in our shoulders and our arms and our wrists. So while you're doing this, you lift your shoulders up and then just drop them. Okay, now see what happened there? It affected the timing, it affected the sound of the note. So I just kind of like randomly doing it, okay, and then I rushed that note and it came out louder. So what you want to do is see if you can do this drop and have it not actually impact the sound of the notes or the tempo, meaning how fast these notes are being played or how loud they're being played. I'm feeling a bit of tension in my lower back right now, which is not good. So you just always want to try and be as relaxed as possible. Take some deep breaths if you have to. And get rid of any tension. So I've done that with my shoulders. Now you can try it with your elbows up, and same thing. Okay, I rushed that. Hold them up and let them drop. As I dropped, that note came out a bit louder probably. So, don't be afraid to do this for a while. You're training your body how to play this instrument in a relaxed state. And if you can get that going off the top, it's going to set you up for success later. Now we can look and move to our wrists. And so as I play, I'm kind of, once again, trying to keep a consistent tone. And I'm just circling outward at first. And then you can come back inward like this. The wrist is going down below the keyboard, coming back up. This is all designed to just promote a release of tension, to warm up your hands. Develop the touch and consistency of tone generation and everything. So don't discount this. Even though it's only these 5 notes, it's very simple. This first step in the warm-up process, and I do this every time I practice, is very important. Now, we're going to start doing some finger independence exercises. So now let's keep doing that exact 5-finger out from G. These fingers have numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So from your first finger all the way to your 5th finger. But this time we're going to hold down one finger at a time in succession, and we're going to go through all the permutations of doing that with our thumb, and then each successive finger, and then combinations of our fingers and thumbs. So we start with the thumb and we just hold our thumb down while we go out and back. So now we're just using our fingers, you see. And once again, we're trying to maintain a consistent volume. We're trying to stay relaxed. Okay, now we're gonna do our second finger and hold that one down while we go around it. And so, similarly with our third finger. And I'm noticing, I'm trying to notice for any tension. And if I feel it, or if this doesn't feel comfortable, I'll just stay with it until it releases, until I feel that I'm executing this consistently. Okay, now our fourth finger. You don't want to be lifting. This is going to feel very awkward at first, by the way. And you don't want to be lifting your other fingers dramatically or anything. You notice I'm keeping them very, it's efficiency of motion is the name of the game here. Okay, and then to our fifth finger and back down. So then we're going to go thumb and first finger, thumb and second finger, thumb and third finger, and so on and so on. Now we're going to do these two down. And then finally. Okay, and now our second finger and third finger. And through the permutations here as well. So for me, that would be my warm-up. I do have a bit of a tightness here in my mid back on this side. So I'm trying to be aware of that, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm not unnecessarily holding any tension. Okay, so that would be a warm-up. That's the warm-up phase. Now we would move on to some scales, and I'm gonna start with the major scale, and maybe that'll be the extent of this first lesson. Is we're going to talk about what the major scale is and then show you a few ways to practice it, because even if you are more an intermediate student here, you might be thinking, I know my major scales, let's move on. But hear me out. There's some pretty amazing ways to practice a major scale that actually introduce very, very practical musical concepts to your fingers and your ears in terms of what kinds of chords can we create from this scale, how can we voice these chords in different ways. So this second half now, after we've gotten through the warm-up, is going to be focused on, all right, well, how do we approach something like a major scale? And I'm trying to make this accessible to everyone, all levels. So I'm going to take a little bit of time and just describe what a major scale is. Now, we remember this note middle C. And we know that there's different notes that are white and black. If I just play every white note from middle C up to the next middle C, where that pattern repeats, that creates a sequence of notes that we call a major scale. And the construction of this is based on the concept of tones and semitones. So the space between two notes that are directly next to each other on the piano is called a semitone. So that's from C to this black note here, which we would call C sharp or D flat, get into that later, is a semitone. And from this black note to this white note is also a semitone because they are directly next to each other. In this case, there is no black note between these two notes, E and F, so that is also a semitone. But the space between these two white notes, because there's a semitone in between, is called a tone. You could also call them whole steps and half steps, it doesn't matter. So if you analyze the pattern of the C major scale, you can see that starting with this note, we have to go up a tone to the next note, then another tone to the next note, and then a semitone, then a tone, because we've got a black note in between, another tone, and finally a semitone. So there's 2 semitones in here, and it's really easy to see because the keyboard represents it like this. There's no black note in between B and C, and E and F. Those are the semitones. And then everything else is a tone. So the pattern is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Now, if you had that information and you started on any other note on the keyboard, you could construct a major scale just knowing that it's tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So if we start on this note, D, we would go up a tone, and then we wouldn't go to this note because that's only a semitone. We'd have to go to this note. That's another tone. So there's our first 2 tones. Then we have a semitone. So instead of going here to this black note, we go to the very next note, a semitone. Tone, tone, and now another tone, which means we can't play this note. We have to play that note, and then finally a semitone. So listen to that. It has the same pattern and sound as this, but it's just one note, one tone higher. We're starting on a different note, and you can do this for all 12 notes in modern Western music. Okay, fine. So how do you practice this? Fingering is now becomes very important, because you can't do that and then quickly try and move your hand. And you probably even noticed that I was doing this thing where I was crossing my thumb underneath. Okay, and you got to do the same thing in your left hand. You cross your finger over. So I'm crossing my third finger over. So fingering becomes very, very important when we're talking about practicing these scales in a meaningful way. First thing you can do, if you've never played, is just get comfortable with that. But then once you get going, this is the pattern that you're going to employ for the C major scale. Other scales have different fingerings, which we can get to. But for now, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, and then you're going to cross your thumb under. This is the right hand. 1, 2, 3, cross the thumb under to the next note, which is the F, and then play all the way up to the top, and then back down and cross your third finger over to the E and back down. You kind of do the opposite with your left hand. The thumb comes under on the way down, and the third finger goes over on the way up. And you can do them together like that. I like doing everything 2 octaves apart, meaning instead of going to that C, I go down 1 more. It just is a more natural positioning for your hands. It keeps you more relaxed, and in my opinion, it sounds better. Okay. What if you want to go more than 1 octave in the scale? Well, then you have to introduce the concept of the 4th finger. And instead of playing this with my pinky, we're going to keep going. So I got to get my thumb onto the C, right? I got to keep doing that. So the pattern in the right hand is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you resolve after 2 octaves. And then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. And it's the same in the left hand, it's just reversed. We're crossing over the 3rd finger and the 4th finger. Now, what you'll notice as you practice this is that the 4th finger always lands on this, and the 3rd finger always lands on the same note if you're doing it right. And if it's not landing on the same note, you're getting your fingering wrong. So in a C major scale on the right hand, the 4th finger always lands on the B, the note right before we get back to C, the 7th note, you could call it. No matter what you're doing on the way up or the way down, your 4th finger should always be on that B, and in the left hand, it's the D. See? And then crossing over, the 4th finger plays on the D again. Okay, how do you practice this kind of, officially? So I get the metronome going nice and slow, 82 beats per minute. We could even go slower. And I'm going to do a pattern here, and then I'll talk about what it is after the fact. So, and I'm just doing it in 8th notes. And once again, trying to stay consistent. So we went up 2 octaves. And then we actually went into contrary motion, which means I went up with this hand and back down with the left hand. This is where stuff gets tricky, because now our fingers are crossing over differently than they were on the way up. So this is where the first few times you do this, you're going to have to go real slow. So all the way contrary motion back to where we started, and then the left hand comes up 2 octaves. And then again, contrary motion. And then the right hand goes down. Okay. And there's 12 different keys to practice this on. D, we already talked about. So if I was doing it in D, the thing that helps me is remembering, where is my 4th finger landing? How do I keep track of that 4th finger? And in the right hand, it's on the 7th. It's the same as in C. It's on the 7th note. It's on this C sharp. And in the left hand, it's on the E, the 2nd note of the scale. So that would be a great way to start, is to just work through those major scales, doing them in that fashion in the 2 octaves. Okay, so the next thing that we can accomplish with the major scale is understanding, how do you build chords? So now we've only been so far playing in each hand, single notes at a time, even though we're playing 2 hands together, but we're not really playing chords. And chords are when you play more than 1 note. So if I started on C and I just skipped every note in the scale, which is easy again because all the notes are white, and I stopped with, say, these 3 notes, I'd play a very familiar sound, a C major chord. But if you add 1 more note, a 4th note to that, you get a C major 7 chord. And what would happen if we just moved up the scale, and at every note that we start with, we just skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, and play these 4-note chords? Well, then you get this pattern of different chords that have different qualities. And it is important to know what they're called, but for now, if you're just practicing this, it's just a shape thing. And it's really easy on white notes because you can just keep your hand in this shape all the way up and down. Okay, so what if we just tried that? That's a good place to start. But now there's a concept in music called inversions. And this is where we say, well, there's 4 notes here, but what if we played one of those notes in a different location? So what if this C, instead of being here, was up at the top? It's the same chord. We've just moved this note to the top, and now it's called the first inversion. So I'll keep playing down here with my left hand, but now I'm going to go up the scale, and every chord I'm going to play in first inversion. Okay, and then what if we kept doing that? What if we moved this note now to the top and created this shape? That's called second inversion. And we have one more inversion that we could do, which is taking this note and bringing it to the top. I'm going to drop it down an octave just because it sounds a little better. Okay, so that's another way to practice a major scale. So we've got the scale technique practice, contrary motion, all that. Then we've got the chords of the major scale. And just for your awareness, we've got C major, C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished, or B minor 7 flat 5, and then back to the C major 7. And we're doing these in their inversions. So work on that all the way up in all the different versions. Now, then we're going to try this using a technique called drop 2 voicing. So now, instead of always playing the root in our left hand, what we're going to do is we're going to build our first chord, and then we're going to take the second note from the top, this G here, and we're going to bring it down an octave, and we're going to play that in our left hand. Okay? And so we're not going to play it on our right hand. What this does is actually opens up the chord, and it gives it a different characteristic. Listen to the difference. Okay? But now what if this G was down an octave? It feels a little bit more open, right? So now we do the same thing. Through all of the different inversions. So what happens when we're in first inversion and we bring the second note from the top down? Totally different sound. Same chords, but just a different sound. And then we're going to do the same thing. We'll come down here. Drop 2, and then finally, this is my favorite one, because it creates this really neat spacing, and that's a gorgeous sound. What a wonderful sound. Okay, so now we've got major scale, technique practice, right? Just crossing over the fingers, contrary motion, all that. We've got the chords, just getting the basic shapes in root position. I forgot to mention that. That's called root position, because the bottom note of every chord is known as the root. We've got first inversion, we've got second inversion, we've got third inversion, up and down the scale. And now the last one I'll talk about, and then we'll be done, is something that Barry Harris does in his workshops and classes, which is just a cool way of practicing the major scale. This is more advanced, but the sounds that you get, maybe I'll play it up at, does it sound okay down here? Yeah, it sounds pretty good down there. So now what we're doing in the left hand is this pattern where we're playing the root and the seventh, and then we're going down one note from the seventh to the sixth. And now every time we change chords, we get a new root and a new seventh in relation to that root. So B is the seventh of C because it's 7 notes away from the root. And now C is the seventh of D because it's 7 notes away in the scale from the root, which is D. And so this is actually the third, the fifth, and the seventh. So root 3, 5, 7. So we've got 7, 6, 7, 6, just like that, up the scale. And then back down. Then what we're doing in our right hand, I'll do it up here. In our right hand, we're playing the third of the chord in octaves. And then we're doubling that 7 to 6 sound, like this, with the left hand. And then we just move that whole thing up. How does it sound down here? I think if you practiced all of that every day in all 12 keys, as slow as you need to. Oh, when I started, it was a lot of thinking. Next chord. Working out the fingerings. Do it with a metronome every time. If you did that and mastered all of that, you'd be amazed at the improvement. All right. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.